All right, good morning, everybody. You can ignore the title of this because at about 11:30 last night, I decided to do something completely different. So we'll see how this goes. It could be a total disaster. It could be kind of fun. As Steve said, I've kind of hit the trifecta of government, and it's been a total accident the entire time. None of this was planned. None of this was expected. In fact, when I got into government for the first time, it was because I got a random phone call from the city of Washington, D.C. while I was living in London. It was actually kind of funny. I was on a train back from a meeting, and my phone rings, and I pick it up, and I said hello, and the guy on the other end says, "Hi, Brian, this is Lance from Washington, D.C." Full stop. "Hi, Lance, how are you?" Anyway, one thing led to another. We started talking about this, and it seemed like an interesting opportunity, and so I ended up doing it. And the one thing I can say, first and foremost, is that when I first started in government, I had this stereotypical image of a government employee, which I'm sure many people sort of had in their heads when they first started, right? A bunch of sort of lazy bureaucrats who do nothing but punch clocks and ride out pensions. But what I discovered when I first got to DC, and this is actually something that's held true throughout every government job that I've had, is that I've really worked with some of the smartest, most dedicated, most focused people who are there for the right reasons, and are sometimes prevented from doing things that they want to do for lots and lots and lots of reasons. So I'll fast forward ahead. I want to try to keep this relatively short because we haven't had any questions yet, and I want to see if we can maybe generate some Q&A if we can. I'd much rather talk with you instead of talking at you. But let's fast forward to this gig at HHS. So I have actually two titles. One title is Chief Technology Officer. The other title is Entrepreneur in Residence. And in a lot of ways, I focus on that Entrepreneur in Residence title a lot more. One of the things that I've learned over time, and this maybe might make me sound like a bad technologist, but technology in general can be a catalyst or an accelerant or an enabler, but rarely is technology a solution to problems. The thing that tends to solve problems are culture changes or process changes, right? Technology can help with that, but it's not the thing that you drop in that magically fixes everything. And so that's one of the reasons that I consider this EIR thing, the Entrepreneur in Residence part of my title, more important. Now, what does that mean? So we've kind of defined this at HHS as our office is responsible for finding what I would consider to be underutilized assets across the department, figuring out where they are, then figuring out how to drive more value through those assets, all with the intention of essentially making things work better and building what I would consider to be a foundation of government for the next generation. Okay? Now, the first asset that we really started that with was data. And you've heard Todd Park's name. He was my predecessor at HHS. So for the past few years, my group has really been responsible for spearheading the charge of data liberation and data release at HHS, considering the fact that data is one of these assets that we have in the department that's incredibly underutilized. And frankly, the last few years, it's been a remarkable success, right? We've done this thing that a lot of people in the beginning were highly skeptical about. And to me, the most amazing culmination of this was at the Health Data Palooza 4, which was at the beginning of June. And you got to think, like, this is, I mean, it's a conference all about health data, right? It's a pretty niche group of individuals who might be interested in this stuff. It started 3.5 years ago with 40 people in a room at the Institute of Medicine. And when I kicked off this conference at the beginning of June this year, there were literally 2,000 people sitting in an audience. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. We had the Secretary speak, we had the Secretary of State for Health from the UK speak. I mean, it was incredible, right? And so it just goes to show you that if you can kind of persevere through a lot of these things that people wouldn't necessarily have given you the first chance in hell of actually succeeding at, sometimes they can work. So we're continuing down that data path. We're doing a lot of stuff on data. I won't go into too much detail because I want to talk about the next asset that we're focusing on right now. And remember, I consider this an underutilized asset. And that's the 90,000 people that work at HHS, or nearly 90,000. So before I do that, I want to ask you guys a question because I'm kind of curious who's in the audience. So how many people here are career civil servants? Most of you. Okay. So how many of you guys have been working for the government for less than 5 years? Most of you. How many have more than 5 years? Oh, all right, good number. How many of you guys feel that in some way, shape, or form during the course of your tenure here, you've been blocked by bureaucracy or bad bosses or, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. And then actually, sort of one other quick question. How many of you guys work for HHS? Good. No, you guys are the ones I'm looking for because you're here for a reason. So, okay, here's what we believe. Number one, we believe that we have massive challenges, especially in healthcare right now. I think there's not a single person in this country who would argue that the healthcare system in this country is not broken. It's just an argument about how to fix it. And that's just one example, but there are plenty of challenges out there. And the bottom line is that the status quo, the way things work today, that just isn't going to cut it anymore. So some people would say that I think it's innovation that we're looking for, you know, this concept of innovation. I really hate that word. And it's somewhat ironic since my title in Maryland had the word innovation in it. But the reason I hate it is this. If I tell you guys to go and innovate, what are you going to do? Right? I mean, there's no action that's linked to the word innovation. It's sort of amorphous, and I think it means different things to different people. So one of the first things that we've done is defined this term, innovation, so that when we use it, people know what we're talking about. And here's how I define it. Innovation to me is the direct result of the freedom to experiment. Okay? And the reason, if you think about it, I like this because, first of all, it encodes action, right? I can teach you how to experiment. I can teach you to define a hypothesis. I can teach you to run that hypothesis through some tests to generate some metrics, to figure out whether those metrics tell you whether that hypothesis was true or untrue, and then fold that back into the next iteration of the experiment. Secondly, the idea of experimentation actually encodes failure, right? It encodes unsuccessful experiments. And that's one thing we're really, really bad at doing in government, is accepting this premise that things might not work. And so if I can create a structure that allows people to potentially do things that don't work, all of a sudden I think we have the opportunity to kind of move the ball significantly forward. And then finally, this idea of freedom, I think, is the most important one, right? You need breathing room. You need air cover. You need space to do this stuff. And so in many ways, sometimes when people ask me what my job is, I tell them I'm a risk aggregator, right? My job is to basically give people air cover. I've literally written emails to people because they've been nervous about doing something or whatever, which basically say, Dear John, I, Bryan Sivak, order you to do this. Sincerely, Bryan. Which, that they can pull out if they need to as air cover. And so in a lot of, that's the point. I can take a lot of body blows before I go down. And so if I can, right, I'm going to walk out of here and get fired. But if I can provide some help for people to actually accomplish some of the things they're trying to do, it works. It's better for everybody. Really, the question, I think, becomes then, how can we teach people in a bureaucracy to intelligently experiment? How can we give them the freedom to do that in these massive bureaucracies that exist? And so at a high level, we have a few guiding principles that sort of we follow to do this. Number one, that our actions are guided completely by openness and transparency. We don't operate behind any veils. There's no secrets, We want to make sure that everybody knows everything that we're doing at all times, because they are a little bit, in some ways, subversive and challenging to the status quo. And if we do it out in the open, nobody can accuse us of trying to hide behind anything. Secondly, and this is sort of echoing a point from the previous talk, our job is really to enable others to succeed, not for us to succeed ourselves, right? We have a real small team, but we view ourselves almost as like the fulcrum of the lever, right? So if we can move that fulcrum into the right place, we can move this massive organization. And then maybe most importantly, and this is something that I firmly believe in because I haven't been proved wrong yet, there is a solution to every problem, right? We spend a lot of time, it's real easy, especially in government, for somebody to say no. Right? It's a lot harder for somebody to say yes, but I have yet to run into a problem that we couldn't get to a solution to. And so I want you guys to remember that, because I really believe that anything is possible. And part of our job is to help people realize that belief. Now, I don't want to take too much time to go into the details of what we're actually doing. But I want to just sketch it out at a high level, because I want to see if we have time for some Q&A at the end. I'm not quite sure how much time I have left. But basically the way we're doing this, if we created a platform that essentially has a few different programs that are a part of it, each attempting to solve a different problem. How many of you guys know who Tony Hsieh is, founder, CEO of Zappos? So one of the things he likes to talk about is this idea of serendipitous collision as the thing that actually drives new ideas and new thoughts and new experiences and all that kind of stuff. And I'm actually a firm believer in this, right? We operate in these incredibly siloed and hierarchical structures where you basically talk to people who do the exact same thing that you do or focus on the same problem, almost, similar backgrounds, similar cultures, et cetera, and we never get any kind of new ideas into the mix, right? But if you look across HHS, what's amazing is that we have these massive siloed bureaucracies, but they're all doing kind of the same stuff, or they're all focusing on solving different aspects of the same problem at a high level. So if we can put people together, right? I think that we can start to break down some of those walls, start to allow for some of these serendipitous collisions and do interesting things. In fact, it's a longer story, but you guys remember the superbug that was found at the NIH hospital a couple years ago? The solution to that problem is like incredibly cool. It's all about DNA sequencing bacteria, and it's like an epidemiological mystery that unraveled. It was like the coolest thing. But the reason that the woman who came up with the idea to sequence the DNA of this virus, she literally was just like in the right place at the right time and heard a conversation happening and said, "Hey, I've got an idea," and that's how it happened, right? And so if we can make those kind of things happen more and more frequently, I think we have an amazing chance at like blowing this thing up. So basically the way this platform works is pretty straightforward. The foundation of it is built on this idea of enabling collaboration. And there are two ways that we want to do that, physically and virtually. And so this is interesting because it's going to kind of tie together the last two talks in some way, shape, or form. Virtually, we just launched about 8 months ago a virtual platform for collaboration across HHS. It's just Yammer, it's simple. It was easy to do, but the interesting thing was that we got the secretary to basically do it, right? Meaning that she said, we're gonna use this, then all of a sudden you've got air cover from the top for everybody to use it. And now, 8 months later, we have about 16,000 people signed up for the platform, which I think is pretty good given, that it's only been 8 months and we only have 90,000 people. So we got a pretty good percentage. Now we're continuing to work on engagement. It's not enough just to sign up for this. It's better to be engaged, and you kind of have some great conversations going on and great connections being made, but I think that there's more that we can do. The second thing, and the first speaker actually talked a little bit about this. I come from a Silicon Valley background, right? I really hate walls in workspaces, like really hate walls. I like big, wide open spaces, no offices, lots of collaboration space. If you walk into my building at HHS, well, first of all you see are hallways, but if you walk into like where the offices part is off the hallways, all you'll see are cubes that go up to the sky and shut doors and very few people wandering around. And the only thing that you'll serendipitously collide with in there is air. And so we're trying to change that. And what we want to do is build basically a massive collaboration space that's open not only to everybody within the department to just come and work from whenever, but I also want to try to open it up to people from the outside world. We deal with a lot of people who don't work in government all the time, right? Whether they're vendors or advocates or what have you. And they're in DC a lot. And so I think it would be pretty cool. You got a couple hours of downtime, come and hang out with us. Come and do some work from our space. Come and talk to us about what you do. Talk to other people about what you do. And I just feel like, that's one way of using the government's power to convene in an incredibly positive way. So that's the foundation of this whole thing. It's all in collaboration. The next layer up is identifying what I would consider to be the early adopters within HHS. And we have a couple of different programs that are designed to do that. For those of you, actually I'm kind of curious, from HHS in particular, have you heard of this HHS Ignite thing that we did? A couple of you have? Okay. It's a really simple idea, seed funding for new concepts, right? So it's like, if you have a new idea that you think can advance something that we're doing at HHS, whether it's internal or external, we will, there's an application process you can do, and a couple of things will happen if you get selected. One, you get up to $10,000 to do it. Number two, and most importantly, you get either 100% of your time for 3 months or 50% of your time for 6 months to work on it. And that's a big deal. The reason that we can do that is because the way we structured the program, the secretary is the one who's making the selections of the things that are going to go forward, and so it's her program, it's her call, right? She runs the show. What's interesting about that is we didn't market it too heavily internally because this was like sort of our beta, our pilot, it's our experiment, and we only had 80 grand to play with, so we could only give it to 8 projects at most. And so we put the call out for applications. We expected about 15 to 20 maybe. We got 67, which I thought was interesting. What was really interesting then is that it was actually a perfect bell curve when we did the analysis of the quality of the applications. Some were like, not so good down here. The majority were pretty good, and then there were some that were just really exceptional. And so of that really exceptional number, there were 13, which is 5 more than we expected. And so I handed the secretary a document that basically listed all 13 and said, you got to pick 8. And she read through them, and she's like, why can't we just do all 13? I'm like, well, can you find me more money? And she said, we can find you more money. So we're doing all 13, which is great because it would have been hard to actually select 8 out of those 13. But they just kicked off. They've got 6 months, literally from, I believe, 2 weeks ago, to actually execute on these programs and to see where we go. And there's some really, really cool things in there. What I also should say is everything I'm talking about right now is documented on hhs.gov/open. So if you want to go and take a look and check it out, feel free. So there are a couple other things in the sort of identification space. Again, for those of you who are in HHS, you should think about joining our Innovation Council. This is sort of a monthly gathering of people from across the department who all have interest in these things. And a lot of these ideas have come out of the Innovation Council, and also a lot of these ideas that we're actually doing we've formed like work groups out of those people to actually help execute on these things. So if you're interested, drop me a line, we'll get you plugged in. The next layer up is this idea of bringing external ideas into the mix. And we have a couple of different things that we're doing there. Have you guys heard of our HHS Entrepreneurs Program? Any of you? A couple of you. Okay. So basically the idea here is that we take applications from across the department. These are the sort of high risk, high reward things that might be challenging to solve in some way, shape, or form, and then get people from the outside world to apply to come in for a period of 12 months to basically focus on nothing but that. We're in the middle of our first round right now. I was a little skeptical at first when we launched this. I wasn't sure if it would work, and it's been probably one of the most amazing things I've seen. Each one of the 4 teams in the 4 different areas of HHS have run into their own unique and interesting bureaucratic challenges, and they've all had to solve these problems in ways that I was surprised by. And so, this is something that I'm intrigued to continue because it's been amazing just what's happened with this thing. Much longer story, which I don't have time to tell right now. But the other thing I wanted to say is that round 2 of HHS Entrepreneurs, the application period is open right now for people who want to apply. So I know you guys are all doing your jobs, and so I don't want to encourage you to leave your jobs, but if you happen to know somebody who might be interested in applying for one of these things, please tell them. It's on hhs.gov/open again, and it's just a short application that will then go through an interview process and a few other things. So the final piece of the whole puzzle to me is what I would consider to be this viral engine of growth, right? Which is the idea of recognizing people who are doing interesting things at the department, either successful or unsuccessful, but people who've taken a chance. And this is the HHS Innovates program, where basically people get nominated and by their peers or themselves, and then voted on by the entire department, and then the secretary actually makes selections out of this sort of shrunken down list of the 3 groups that win her award, and then 3 honorable mentions. Now the groups that win the award get, every member of the group gets a check for $2,500. It's nice, but it's actually the least important part of the whole thing. The most important part of the whole thing is that they all come to DC. They bring their families sometimes. They have a really nice ceremony with the secretary and the deputy secretary and the entire leadership of the department, including the operating divisions. There's a lunch, pictures are taken, hands are shaken, and it's incredible to watch this, right? It's like amazing how meaningful that is. And then the idea is once that happens, hopefully they and their peers then feel like this is an encouraged behavior that should happen across the department, and that this is something that we want to see continue. And so that's the idea. This is like that sort of viral growth engine that we want to turn on and let happen. So I know I only have a few minutes left, and I did say I wanted to take some questions, so I'll kind of stop there. I just want to remind you guys, one other thing that I wanted to say, and you can find this also on hhs.gov/open. We just released, I hate strategic plans, so I don't want to call it a strategic plan. It's like an execution plan for all of this stuff, which details both our philosophy and then sort of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We just released that, but released it in sort of draft form, open for comments. And so we've got a user voice system set up behind it. And so if you go there, it's like 20 pages long. It's not that long. It's longer than maybe it should have been. But anyway, read it. And we're looking for like all kinds of comments, critical, supportive, grammatical, whatever, right? So take a look. I'm personally, and I'm interested in what you guys have to say, actually probably more than anything else, right? Because you're the ones that hopefully these things will help enable. So take a look, let me know what you think. So that, HHS entrepreneurs, apply for that. Oh, and then one other thing, we're kicking off a new program, which is we're calling an Innovator in Residence thing, and the way we're doing this is in partnership with the private sector. So a private sector entity, at this point, it's all nonprofits, but we might be looking at doing this differently, funds a year-long position to work on a specific discrete problem. We did a pilot of this last year with the West Wireless Foundation, and we brought somebody in to work on the Blue Button campaign. I won't go into details about what that is yet, but it was a great year, a great experience. They agreed to do it again, so we just launched the second piece of the West Wireless Innovator in Residence program. That's open for applications right now, and there will be a few more coming after that, supported by various organizations and focused on specific problems. So keep an eye out for that.